Hi, it's Anna here. Welcome back to my channel. Today I'm back with another book on child development, and I will be discussing and summarizing Your 7-Year-Old, Life in a Minor Key by Louise Bates Ames. There's a reason why all these books that I've summarized before from the same series are so popular on this channel. And that's because, in my mind, these are the best books on child development that I've ever come across. And the reason for that is that they actually were part of a huge study. I think they studied thousands of children over 100 years. So it's a very thorough and methodical study that was done. And they have a way of making you zoom out and not take your child's behavior so personally. What I love about these books is that they normalize the fact that children, just like babies, go through periods of regulation and dysregulation. And so as parents, it makes us, appreciate and accept that fact instead of fighting it. Of course, what I also like about these books is that the authors acknowledge the fact that every child is unique, and they always remind us at the beginning of each book that these are huge generalizations. So the information needs to be taken with a grain of salt. If your child is not behaving in the way that I'm going to describe today as a 7-year-old, it's completely fine. Each child is unique and has their unique personality. I've got 3 children myself. Of course, they are all very different. But what I've noticed with my children is that they go through similar patterns. And that's where these books become very, very helpful. First, I will discuss characteristics of the 7-year-old. Then I will discuss their relationship with others. And we'll end with some general interests and abilities. Let's start with discussing characteristics of the 7-year-old. 7-year-old can be best described as an age of withdrawal, which is actually quite noticeable after the energy and difficulty of 6-year-old. Of course, they will have moments of high energy, but overall, it is an age of withdrawal, of pulling away, of calming down. Typically, a 7-year-old is calmer than at age 6. He is thoughtful and a good listener, loves to think, observe, and reflect. They tend to be self-absorbed. They love to argue, but go along with solutions. They are becoming more independent, so they like to plan their own days. They have increasing control over their body, thoughts, and temper, and they are less selfish and more forgiving than previous years. In terms of their mood, they can be quite moody, morose, melancholic, and often brood and sulk. They can be a worrier where they will worry about everything. They tend to worry that people won't like them, and they often think that people are mean and always picking on them. So it's good to not always take what they are saying literally, as there are often 2 sides to the story. They can often be heard saying, "Nobody cares about me." They often ask, "Why do I have to and why should I?" They do not respond well to humor yet, and they are hard to satisfy and tend to be easily disappointed. Any minor pain or discomfort may be interpreted as a fatal illness. Also, they have many fears, afraid of things that have never happened, like being late for school or fear of the dark. In addition to having many worries and fears, the child of this age often feels that he has all the bad luck. The 7-year-old also tends to feel strongly that parents like brothers and sisters better than they like him, and that they do more for others in the family than they do for him. 7's characteristic expression may be a frown with lips curled downward. Tears come easily, although the child may try to hold them back, because he's embarrassed to cry in front of other people. Also, 7 is easily disappointed. Things so often do not turn out as expected. If things go wrong at play, he is likely to leave the group, mumbling to himself, "I'm quitting." Rushes to his rooms and slams the door. He may even threaten to run away from home. 7 is a good listener and, within his own limits, a good student. He likes to read and be read to, watch TV, talk things over, and work things out for himself. A difficult intellectual problem can prove a challenge rather than cause a frustration it might have at 6. In fact, 7 can be a delightful age if the adult is willing to accept the child's feelings and sensitivities, frequent brooding and sulking, and moodiness, as well as the more pleasant aspects of this quiet, withdrawn age. To some extent, 7 lives in a world of thought and loves to think things through. Just as his hands are busy touching, exploring, feeling everything with which he comes into contact, so his mind is busy observing, reflecting. He takes in infinitely more than he gives out, and his thought processes are probably much more intense than they appear to be on the surface. He may even talk to himself in front of the mirror. It is as though the child of this age were trying to define himself, and he does this in part by watching the outside world and then thinking over the things he has observed. In fact, 7 expresses at times a fine new sense of growing independence. A wish at least to try to work things out without help instead of expecting others to solve his problems for him, as he did earlier. Perhaps most helpful to the adults is the child's increasing reasonableness, his willingness, if he's in a good mood, to listen to somebody else's side of the story. Now he can on occasion even lose at competitive games without blowing up. They have a tendency towards perseverance, a tendency to go on with a task or a situation until it is completed to satisfaction or until somebody stops him. The 7-year-old becomes more aware of himself as a person. He's less selfish than at 6, but extremely self-absorbed. By absorbing impressions of things seen and heard and read, and by working things over in his mind, 7 seems to be strengthening and building up a sense of self for the time when he will burst out into the world at 8. The 8-year-old will take his self out into the world to see what he can do with it. But at 7, he's busy improving, strengthening, discovering his self. I guess you could say building a foundation. So time alone with special pursuits is treasured. 7 likes to have a room of his own to which he can retreat and where he can protect his thing. With some 7, self-awareness relates strongly to the physical self. He's aware of his body and is sensitive about exposing it, especially to the opposite sex. He may refuse to use the toilet at school if there is no door on it. He does not like to be touched. The typical 7-year-old has rather high standards and ideals, and is serious about self and is responsible, and wants to do things right. In fact, many mothers feel that their children are too anxious to be perfect, too much afraid of failure. Many 7-year-old girls as well as boys do set very high standards for themselves and are ashamed of any mistake, and may wish to bring home only papers that are 100%. This wish for perfection may be the reason why, when engaged in desk work, the child erases so much. 7 has been called by some teachers the eraser age. It is hard to get everything just right. 7 keeps working at a task until it is finished. 6 is an attacker, a good starter. 7 is more of a finisher. With a characteristic tendency to withdraw, it is not surprising that when things go wrong in their dealing with others, instead of staying and fighting it out as they might have done earlier, 7-year-olds may merely withdraw from the scene, muttering "not fair." 7 wants to make a place for himself. This place may be a physical one, his place at the table or in the family car, or he wants to make his place by good behavior, both at home and at school. Sibling difficulties may be a part of his need to make his own place in the family more distinct. There are many positives to this age. The child is increasingly in control of his body, control of thoughts, temper, striking out voice, and there's no wonder that those kids fatigue easily and must often be protected from their own demands on themselves. While conflict at 6 tends to be chiefly with their mother and over things they are supposed to do or not do, conflict now at 7 years old is more within themselves, over accomplishments, ability, performance, living up to their own standards. The parent of the 7-year-old needs to steer a delicate course between being reasonably sympathetic to the many complaints that the child may utter, and yet not taking these complaints too seriously. It is important to keep in mind that all this sulking, pouting, and worrying are normal expressions of the age. The child is not just acting this way on purpose. Sympathize within reason, and at the same time try to remain relatively unmoved. Don't meet dramatics with dramatics. So now I'd like to talk about the relationship that the child has with others, and we'll start with the mother. So the good news is that the mother-child relationship is a lot less tangled than it was at 6, and it is a lot less intense than it will be at 8. And I will be doing the 8-year-old video another time. The 7-year-old actually wants his mother to listen to his many complaints and sympathize with him, and to support him when things go wrong, which they tend to happen quite often. He needs her to calm his fears, soothe his anxieties, and solve his many real or imagined problems. So it's more of a friendly and forgiving relationship, which is so welcomed after the often argumentative periods of dysregulation of the 6-year-old. Some 7-year-olds write their moms really friendly notes, and the really noticeable thing at this age is that the child actually really cares about what his mom thinks of him. So now let's move on to the relationship with siblings. The 7-year-old fights less than formerly, and they are quite as likely to withdraw to their own rooms as they are to stay and fight things out. They are good and caring with young siblings of 2-year-old, but if sibling is closer in age, they're likely to tease them, bicker, poke, or hit. They are good with much older siblings because they admire them, they look up to them, and boast about them, and are gratified when they pay attention to him. Like I've mentioned before, this is a strong age for complaints that things aren't fair, and especially with siblings. With the family, home and family are extremely important to 7-year-olds, and the majority are proud of their own families and compare them favorably to the families of other children. Most 7-year-olds especially enjoy family outings and as a rule behave better on such outings and also in public than when they were younger. With friends, it's actually very dependent on child's basic individuality. Some seem never to be without a close friend or group of friends, and others seem to have a hard time finding even a single friend. The fact that the 7-year-old is less competitive than at 6 makes play more harmonious. 7 is beginning to be aware of his friends' attitudes and reactions, and several children are likely to gang up against some other child. The child may worry about his place in the group and may fear that he cannot hold his own and that others do not like him. He particularly does not want the other kid to laugh at him. Lastly, with the teacher relationship, although to many 6-year-olds, teacher's words is law and her way of doing things is the right way, his relationship with her is not as close emotionally as it was in preschool or kindy. The 6-year-old relates to the teacher through materials and activities. In contrast, the 7-year-old tends to have a highly personal response to teacher. 7-year-olds want their own teacher, no substitutes, and are very demanding of her attention. Many need her permission to begin even the simplest tasks. Much of a child's success and happiness in school depends on the success of his relationship with the teacher. Children like to stand by the teacher and hold their hand. They each want a special, separate relationship with her. But the 7-year-old may do a good deal of complaining about her and may say that she's mean and unfair. 7 does not take correction well. Now let's move on to general interests and abilities. We'll start with play. Play interests are multiple. They find it hard to stop what they are doing, and they are inclined to be obsessive in their play interests. Many are said to have a mania for comic books and coloring. They can spend hours at whatever they are doing, and they have a greater capacity to play alone. They are good at planning what they are going to do. They can handle board games much better than they did at 6 because they are less competitive. They can lose but like to keep playing until they finally win. Boys especially love magic and tricks. Collecting is very important, and collecting interests may range from bottle tops to stones. But quantity rather than quality or classification is the rule. Play is more complex now than it used to be because children can take and give instructions to each other on how the rules should be played. With reading, the typical 7-year-old is in a transition stage. He still likes to be read to, but at the same time, especially as the year moves on, he likes very much to read by himself. Some are known to be chain readers, for they move almost without pause from one book to another. They love riddles and guessing games, and comic books are favorites. And finally, in terms of their physical capacity, they seem much better coordinated physically than at 6. They no longer trip over a piece of string or bump into things. They are more self-contained, more restrained, more cautious, and less interested in sheer physical activity for its own sake. They become extremely engrossed in what they are doing. So to end this, I also wanted to give some advice in terms of discipline at this age. The author advises that 7-year-old is a procrastinator with a very short memory and tend to be quite easily distracted, so they will need a lot of reminding. I do not want to elaborate further on disciplining because I feel like I've done it for all the other ages, and I also have this video that you can refer to in terms of what I think is the most effective way of disciplining. That's all I had for today. I hope you're finding this video helpful. I will be bringing your 8-year-old soon as well because I feel like it was a very difficult age for both of my girls, and so I'm guessing that it's the case for you guys as well, and you might find it helpful. Please feel free to comment on this video. Comments are always appreciated. I love the dialogue. I love to hear how these videos are helping you or if they're not helping you, and especially love to hear your own experience. I always find it very rich when people actually provide real life examples of what they are going through. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.